So I think that we need to take a minute to check in on Candace Owens because I really do have some concerns about whether our friend here is doing okay. Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. You know I appreciate you clicking on the video to watch it, and since you are here, it would just take one more second and one more click to hit that subscribe button and help me to grow this channel. And to those of you that are returning, you know that I appreciate you always coming back, liking the videos, leaving your comments, engaging in the conversation, and supporting me. And I would love it if you would just make sure that you are subscribed as well. It has been a while since we have touched on what is going on with Candace Owens, and I really haven't said that much about her because there are a lot of other things going on that we need to be worrying about. But I do think it's important to check in with other commentators at times, particularly when they seem to be getting a lot of negative attention, and we need to see what all the fuss is about. Now, as we know, she had a very messy breakup with the Daily Wire just a few months ago, and I did post a video on that in which I said that we really don't know why they split. And even though I feel like more information has kind of come out since then, we still haven't gotten a straight answer, and I don't know if we're ever going to get a straight answer. I also think that unfortunately this situation divided conservative audiences on whether or not to support the Daily Wire or to support Candace, because apparently we can't have like a split custody agreement and just agree not to talk badly about one when we're in the presence of the other. But I personally maintain that I think both the Daily Wire and Candace Owens have valuable things to offer the public conversation about so many important topics. She has since launched a new channel, and I have watched a few of her episodes at this point, and I do find her new channel quite interesting. Since she launched independently, I believe it has become abundantly clear, as per her topic choices, that the things she really wanted to dig into are the darkest corners of some of the most widely discussed events in modern history, and get us to really question the narratives that we have been told about so many of these things. She is really diving into these rabbit holes and asking us to literally question everything we've ever understood about so many of these events. And the reason that I think that this is so critically important today is that our public education system is not even scratching the surface of so many of these things, let alone asking these next generations to dig into them and understand them in their entirety. Most millennials and Gen Z, and definitely Gen Alpha, are so deeply misguided on so much of American history and definitely world history. And of course, the goal of the public education system in not teaching these things properly is so that the next generations won't recognize when they are in fact being used to repeat the horrifying events of the past. She's talked about 9/11, she's talked about the CIA, the Manson family, World War II, and so many of these other important topics, and she's reigniting conversations about these things and encouraging people to think in a way that honestly is heavily discouraged and often dismissed these days, usually with words like conspiracy theory or whatever the talking point is that will stir our heavily manipulated society away from doing any sort of independent analysis of their own. And I have to say, after the last few years and really seeing how corrupt and evil our government is and how much they truly manipulate so much of what we think and what we see, it really has changed how I look at history as well, and it makes me wonder how much we can really believe what we've been told. And based on the recommendation of Candace herself, I did start reading this book, Chaos, which has really been interesting. It delves into the whole case and narrative surrounding the Tate murders and the Manson family in 1969, and pretty much debunks everything we thought we knew about that situation and so many other things. So I'm open to her line of thinking. I'm open to her questions. I'm just wondering if she's starting to go over the edge a little bit, or perhaps on the flip side, is her approach to these topics truly genius and we're doing exactly what she intends for us to do? Or maybe it's just a little bit of both. So there's one particular example that I want to focus on because it has gotten a lot of attention lately, though many of the things that she's talked about have gotten attention lately, and unfortunately it's been a lot of negative attention, which again might be part of her plan, and I'll get into that in a minute. But a clip went viral of her talking about the atrocities committed by the Nazis in the concentration camps during World War II. And she specifically brings up Joseph Mengele, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, who is known for the inhumane torture and medical experiments he committed against prisoners in Auschwitz during the war. This man had the nickname the Angel of Death, and the horrifying things he did to innocent people have been widely documented. However, this particular clip shows that Candace might have a very different view on this.
They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. I'm like, the idea that they just like cut a human up and then sewed them back together. Why would you do that? Literally, even if you're the most evil person in the world, that's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. Just slice a person in half and sew them together. That just sounds like bizarre propaganda.
So clearly people were not happy with what she said, which is understandable because this legitimately sounds like Holocaust denial, which fuels the idea that perhaps Candace, in her dive down these rabbit holes, is perhaps losing her grip a little bit. Of course, I did want to listen to the entire segment that this clip came from to understand the full context of what she was saying, which is something that we should all do all the time, because about 99.9% of the time, these short clips are not an accurate representation of the entire point that was being made. So this particular clip came from an episode that she titled Literally Hitler. And she shared it a few days ago, but she opened the show like this.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today we're going to keep the subject matter light. We're going to discuss Adolf Hitler.
So she starts out by talking about how Hitler seems to be a forbidden subject and that it's a name kind of like Voldemort from Harry Potter that we just can't utter, especially without getting this visceral reaction from people. It's a name that literally sparks fear and disgust, and it has for decades, and rightfully so. Yet what it has done is put the entire focus of our fear and disgust on this one person. And by doing so, it's made it seem like he was the only person and that Nazis were the only people capable of committing the crimes against humanity that they were historically known for. And that mindset has essentially blocked us from being able to recognize other groups throughout history that have committed similar acts against humanity. And it's also blocked us from the ability to acknowledge when similar tactics and behaviors are happening right in front of our eyes. So throughout this episode, she points to a documentary put out by the BBC in 2015 called The Savage Peace. And in this documentary, she talks about how Germans were targeted in the Soviet Union after the war ended, which most of us already know. So she talks about how we get so outraged by the acts that Nazis committed against innocent people in concentration camps, but we tend to ignore all of the heinous things that people did to innocent Germans just because they were German and therefore somehow Nazi by association, and that the only difference we ever really make is that Jews were put in camps while post-war Germans weren't. So therefore the criminal acts against them weren't as bad, at least not in our minds.
I can say that what happened here in 45 is no different at all to the Third Reich. The morals of these people who did this, they were the same.
They were the same. You're probably thinking, but Candace, literally Hitler. He had the camps. That's what made it different. It was the camps. Imagine camps being used to kill people. Oh, you mean the exact same camps that we then transferred the Germans into so that we could, mass kill them?
I do think it's important to go back and listen to everything that she was saying. And I do think her point was to remind us that Germans weren't the only people capable of being brainwashed into doing these things, into splitting up human beings by label and justifying torture and inhumane acts against innocent people simply based on who they were. People feeling justified in dehumanizing others so that they could feel better about harming them was a kind of belief system that had a global impact, and it was not isolated to Nazi Germany. And the actions that people felt justified in carrying out against others simply based on the group that they were labeled as did not end with the war. And the reason that I keep saying group label is because those are the tactics of the Marxists that we have in office in so many of our systems today, to remove our humanity and our ability to see each other as people and to separate us by groups and pit us against each other as groups and to justify justify acts of violence against people simply based on their political affiliation or religion. I do believe that her whole point was perhaps to slap some sense into people and to snap us out of this mass psychosis that's been going on and help us recognize that the very things we've associated with some of the most egregious dictators throughout history are actually happening today, right in front of us. And what has become abundantly clear from the atrocities that were continued for years following the war is that you can stop the acts of certain people, like the act of rounding up people and putting them in camps, which are specific things that stopped with the war. But once certain ideas have spread through a society like cancer, this is what takes far longer to remove from society. Ideas are far more deep-rooted and hard to reverse, and it is those ideas that are passed on through generations, no matter how evil we know they are. However, when it comes to this particular clip that I played earlier that went viral, when Candace is saying that the acts carried out by Joseph Mengele sound far too far-fetched and nonsensical to be real, that's where she kind of loses me, and I think where she loses a lot of people, and rightfully so. And I think that there was one particular comment under this video that highlights how I perceived her approach to this. Couldn't find it here, but I did take a screenshot of it. It says, you speak as though none of this has ever come to light, as though you are the first person to bring this information to the people after 80 years. This info is readily available, just pick up a book. Even though my reading on the Holocaust and World War II, I have come across all of this. It is no secret that atrocities were committed on both sides. Again, it's no secret. The Germans were treated in horrendous and inhumane ways. You should do some more reading and realize that the experiments done in concentration camps by Nazis are not bizarre propaganda. They are first-hand accounts by Nazi doctors confirming all the atrocious experiments that were done. I wish you could learn to highlight the story of one people, in this case the Germans, without invalidating what actually happened to another group of people and insinuating it's propaganda. That's simply not necessary. What happened to the Germans after the war is mind-bogglingly terrible, but you don't need to disparage the history of the Holocaust in order to make this point. So it's almost like Candace is mocking people for focusing so much on the horrors of the concentration camps, and she's almost calling everyone stupid because she's assuming we didn't know that these things continued on a global scale in some capacity for a long time afterward. And it's even more bizarre that Candace is insinuating that these things that happened in the concentration camps sound like made up propaganda. We can acknowledge that people carried out inhumane acts against Germans even after the war ended for no reason other than they were German. Yet she doesn't think that people who literally viewed Jews as nothing more than animals had the propensity to do whatever egregious and heinous act they could come up with in their brain for no reason other than the fact that they felt that they had the right to. What seems to drive her over the edge is the idea that people would do this to children. I mean, Candace, might I welcome you to the year 2024 when we have children being taken into surgeries where they are having chunks of their arms sliced off to create and attach appendages that are supposed to resemble the biological anatomy of the opposite sex, and that is happening almost on a daily basis in this country now. Not to mention the documentation of these experiments, of what these physicians were doing on to their prisoners of all ages, is pretty much indisputable at this point.
Have you heard of Dr. Sidney Gottlieb? Have you ever heard of the CIA? If you think experimentation is unique to the Nazis, you need to wake up. Oh, but Candace, the Nazis murdered people with special needs. You heard of Planned Parenthood? They literally tell you to abort your children if they have special needs. You learn that in the school system. And in terms of experimentation, I invite you again as required readings. This book, Chaos, man, this specific operation that took place under the directive of LBJ, who was also a monster, a monstrous president that we had. And this operation was called Phoenix. In 1968, CIA scientists at the Bien Hoa prison outside Saigon surgically opened the skulls of 3 prisoners, implanted electrodes on their brains, gave them daggers, and left them alone in a room. They wanted to shock the prisoners into killing one another. But when the efforts failed, the prisoners were shot and their bodies were burned. Yeah, it's an operation where we just were mass killing civilians, which we do a lot. But there, of course, if we do it, it's different.
Just have to say, doesn't that seem like an incredible waste of time and resources? But if you can believe that happened, then So I understand, at least I think I understand, the points that she is trying to make, that we've got to get out of this headspace where so many people have been conditioned to believe that evil is only associated with people like Hitler and Stalin. People directly around us are capable of normalizing the same level of inhumanity around us now. I think because we're not under the directive of one of these more well-known monsters, that we think we're immune from descending that far into darkness. But what I don't get is why you need to minimize the horrors committed against one group of people to understand the atrocities committed against another. So honestly, I do appreciate that she brings these things up. Like I said, the book Chaos has been very, very interesting to read, and I think she's forcing people to think about so many of these historical events in ways that we haven't been asked to consider them before, which is so incredibly important, probably now more than ever. But I also think that we need to stay grounded in reality and not get so far down these rabbit holes that we attach ourselves completely to the other side and we start ignoring important truths and facts in the process. What I also want to point out is that while everybody is piling up against Candace because it does seem like she is looking for those rage bait clicks, perhaps that she's taking this approach intentionally, because even if you click on this content with the idea that you're going to disagree with her and call her out, at least you are being exposed to ideas that you hadn't heard before or that someone else hadn't heard before. And this type of conversation makes its rounds on social media. She did recently post 5.7 million people are engaging in learning about the ethnic cleansing of Germans. This is the perfect karmic result of the media conspiring to draw negative attention to my episode. What they didn't want to see is now being seen. So it's almost like the Streisand effect, that if you get out there and tell people not to watch it, it has the opposite effect. If you get out there and tell people not to pay attention to it, it's going to draw more attention to it. So that is what has been happening. And honestly, those of us that are familiar with all of these ideas that she has outlined in this particular episode are probably not her target audience. I would guess that it's the heart and soul of outrage and bitterness these days, which would be today's liberals who demonstrate on a daily basis that they know absolutely nothing about these historical events. That would be her target audience because they absolutely need to hear it. And it's clear that they don't know these facts because they don't realize that the same tactics are being used on them that convince people to dehumanize others, including children, and therefore making them feel justified in harming innocent people based on an ideology. And I guess if rage baiting is what gets them to click on her videos and hear all of this and causes it to go viral, and to reach far more people than it would have otherwise and reach far more people who need to see it, then I guess I can't blame her for taking this approach. But I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you think that she is becoming a little bit unhinged, or do you think that there's a method to the madness where she is really just igniting these conversations in a way that she knows people are going to go to her videos, that they're going to go to her channel and they're going to click on these things and actually be exposed to ideas that the public education system has absolutely failed in exposing people to? I just want to make sure that this girl's okay. I just want to make sure that she isn't losing her grip on reality. So let me know what you think. Please be sure to hit that like button. Make sure that you are subscribed. I feel like most people that click on my videos are not subscribed, and I think that is pretty normal for most channels, but I would love your help in growing the audience and reaching more people. So please do so. Keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.